Get settled. You'll see my cool little display. This is what I was talking about last week. I made up a graphic of what I think might be what it looks like when the New Jerusalem heads towards Earth. So kind of looking forward to that day. I'm sure most of us are, as there'll be a new world, new kingdom under our King Jesus. So I named this one today, The Return of King Jesus to the Earth, along with his saints, the church. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you and praise you, Father, so much for all that you do for us, and that and you help us with our lesson today, that you guide me and help me to always be truthful about your word, and that I can do it in a way that's honoring to you. And I give you praise and thanks for all you do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, there were some handouts up front there. It's only one page today, front and back. Today is more about a lot of verses. So, because we're moving into a section of time where, like I said, we're heading back to Earth, along with King Jesus, and we left off at verse 12, and I didn't quite finish what I wanted to last week. So we'll just kind of start off there. I'll start off in verse 11, and this is a review. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. So I got another cool graphic that I've always enjoyed when it comes to thinking about what it's going to be like to come back. And I always like to comment that, have you named your horse yet? As that we're all going to be on mighty steeds. And as I mentioned last time, it won't be on a lowly donkey when the Lord came back into Jerusalem the last time. It'll be on a mighty steed. And let me find my picture. But I kind of envision, as I've mentioned, that I think that we're actually going to come back into New Jerusalem. That'll be our residence when we're in heaven, and we'll just stay there and actually be transported back. So I think it might look a little bit like a moon, like you see in my picture there, actually orbiting the earth. This is just speculation, but there's a lot of verses that talk about light, and I brought that up last week when it comes to how to communicate. And the beauty of light is you can communicate to a lot of people at one time and across long distances. That's why I kind of get the idea of that, of the foundation of the 12 stones is actually different colored light. And we communicate all the time with light these days, known as fiber optics. So it's, again, I could be totally off base and it's totally speculation, but I like to kind of think about what life is going to be like then. But this is one that's going to be more along the lines of what we will probably experience. So I can see us getting on our steeds, leaving that New Jerusalem in orbit and heading to planet Earth with Jesus in the lead. And that's where we are right now. And he's going to take back what was rightfully his in the first place. And we're going to kind of look at that a little bit, which leads us back into Ezekiel 39 again. So let's start off here. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and his righteousness he doth judge and make war. So we start up here in verse 12. Just a couple of things on this particular verse when it comes to what was prophesied by Paul and others, particularly Paul and Jude, about this event. So I always try to support it with additional verses so we can get a good rounded picture. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with him in glory. That was Paul talking about this day. And also Jude, which is the half-brother of Jesus, And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these things, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So pretty strong words there, but unfortunately not everyone is still going to be saved during this period of time. And of course some are going to side with the Antichrist, and actually as you can see in my little picture there, down on the lower left corner, it looks like we got the armies of Satan getting ready to be ready to attack us as we arrive, which is going to be a fool's errand, because Jesus is going to speak a word and they're going to be wiped out. Okay, so moving into verse 12. This is where we left off last week. His eyes were as a flame of fire. On his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew except himself, by himself. So who are we talking about here? And so I just wanted to point to a couple of verses that lets us know that this is the real Messiah. This is the real Jesus Christ. It's not the fake one we saw in Revelation 6, or the one that people are convinced is their Messiah, which are getting ready to do battle at this point. So in Revelation 2:18, we hear this same term used, a flame of fire. And unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These things saith the Lord, Son of God. So we know he's a Son of God, who hath his eyes like under a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass. And also in Revelation 4:10 and 11, And the 24 elders fell down before him that sat on the throne, and worshipped him that liveth for ever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they were created. And I apologize for my phone. I can turn it down. Bless you. So we see that Christ was identified in these verses I just mentioned. And it's a name that has no other name. We see that also in Revelation 2:17. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saying, He that receiveth. So again, pointing to Jesus Christ. And also Revelation 3:12. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from God, and I will write upon him my new name. So, again, that's another verse that kind of ties back to the New Jerusalem. Okay, so here we begin the destruction of God's enemies. And I believe it starts with commercial Babylon, we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to pick up back in Revelation 16:18 through 21, and take a look at this period of time. And I kind of divided this return into three categories, because we know that Babylon has to be destroyed. We know that the enemies that are trying to attack the chosen people that escaped into Petra, right now he's also going to stop there, and that's why his clothing is red. We're going to see that today. And then he's going to finally end up in Jerusalem, where he's going to take back Jerusalem against the enemies who've been gathering together, as we talked about earlier, at the Valley of Armageddon, and that's where the term came from. It's actually the Kidron Valley area is where the battle is going to take place. But they started up in the up near the Galilee area, and that's where they mounted together, and they'll be advancing down towards Jerusalem as Jesus and us come to take back Jerusalem. Real quick overview of what we're going to be looking at here. So there were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as there was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Notice it says nations. And the great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give her the cup of wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So it's going to include Babylon. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail. For the plague thereof was exceedingly great. So again, these are all the different weapons that Jesus is going to use to eliminate all his enemies at this point. And so that's why I can see that this particular passage here speaks to this final battle. Plague of hail. And these hailstones, by the way, are a talent apiece. A talent is somewhere between 94 and 108 pounds as the average. So about 100 pounds each. You can imagine a hailstone the size of 100 pounds each. How do you escape from that? Because it's going to destroy just about anything, including cars, some buildings, which is also reminiscent of a plagues we've seen in Exodus during the time of the Exodus from Israel, which I see as a time when God is using these examples from Exodus that he used once before so that the Jewish nation will actually see that who is actually doing this. Because he did it once before, and almost every Jew, any male Jew who came up through the ranks, went to Torah school and knew all about the Exodus. So they were well aware, and through family history, even today, I'm sure there's plenty of Jews in Israel that know of the Torah and the first 5 books, the Exodus, and all the different stories there. So that when this happens again during this period of time, it's going to immediately put in their minds that this is God doing this. Okay, so on to verse 13. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Well, of course, the word of that particular reference, the Word of God, it takes us back to John. I won't mention it right here, but if you want to make a note, it's John 1 through 3, and verse 14, it talks about the Word of God. So this points exactly to Jesus. And he's dressed in red, just like our little painting here. And the reason he's dripped in, it's not his blood, but the blood of the people that he's eliminated in Petra. And so we're going to look at that first. It's actually in Isaiah 63, 1 through 4. And who is this that cometh from Edom, which is the area where Petra is, with dyed garments from Bozrah? And Bozrah is just another name for that particular area. This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? I have trodden the winepress alone. Basically saying here that Jesus is going to, doesn't need anybody. He's going to be able to do this on his own. So the fact that we're behind him, we're all dressed in white. We're not ready for battle. We're just kind of following along, and he's taking care of everything. And for the people there was none for me, for I will tread them in mine anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will strain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is mine heart, and the year of my redeem is come. So moving on, one other verse, moving on to verse 14. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, that would be us, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. So obviously we don't have any blood on us. So it's going to be one of those things that we're going to be witnesses, but other than that, I don't see we're actually going to be engaged in any battle. But I do see we're going to have a huge role as we move into the next few weeks I think in the cleanup process. So we'll kind of look into that next week when we get to the actual cleanup process. But also in Matthew 24, 27 through 31 speaks to this also. And this is Jesus on the Mount of Olives giving that briefing to everybody, the disciples. For as lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. We point to this because this particular coming, every eye will see him. Everyone will know exactly who he is, because there will be no guesswork. Like there's some other verses that talk about don't go looking in the desert place, he's not there. Don't go looking in the hidden room, because he's not there. I think this is pointing to the fact that even now we're hearing of rumors about that Jews are talking to their Messiah. And that's disturbing, and for them, because that kind of an indication that that person they're talking to may be the Antichrist, and maybe that close. Of course, but I think that that's why Jesus was adamant to make sure that we knew that when he comes, we will know. There won't be no doubt about it. Continuing in Matthew 28, verse 28. For whosoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. We're going to get to that in the cleanup portion. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, the darkening part and all that part there, still a lot of speculation about what that exactly means. It might be just the fact that there's so much smoke and haze from all the destruction that you won't be able to see the sun. If you're anywhere near like a volcanic eruption, the ash cloud could actually be so dense in the skies above that you can't even see the sun or the moon. So it could be what it's talking about, or the fact that maybe because we're behind Jesus, that there's so many of us, which would be an awesome thing, that we're blanking out any heavenly things that you can see, and so the only thing you're going to see is the glory of the Lord coming. And I think that's more of a possibility there also. And verse 31 of this passage. And he shall send his angels with great sound of a trumpet. They shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. There are out there that like to try to point to this verse as the rapture verse in some cases. I think the difference here is that when you look at John 14, 1 through 3, the way that Jesus is going to rapture his church is totally different than what this verse is saying. Because of the verse prior where everybody is going to see him. And I don't believe the rapture that everyone is going to realize what's going on. So I don't see this as a rapture verse. But I do see it as a fulfillment of the leading towards the fulfillment of the Feast of Trumpets, which is the gathering that I think that it points to, and it'll be happening right at the end of the tribulation when the Lord gathers all his elect that are on the planet Earth to Jerusalem to set up the millennium kingdom. So I think that that's what this verse is kind of pointing to. Okay, back to Revelation 19:15. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that he should smite the nations, and he should rule them with a rod of iron. And he treadeth the winepresses of the fierceness and the wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. What a glorious day that's going to be. And also in verse 19, I'm jumping ahead a little bit because 17 and 18 have to do with the cleanup. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. So again, this is the Antichrist and his armies thinking they're going to be able to defeat the Lord. So at this point, we're going to shift, and this is where I think Ezekiel 39 comes back into play. And we're going to look at the first 8 verses. And we'll come back to Revelation 19 when we get to the cleanup stage, and also the rest of Ezekiel 39 has to do with the cleanup. That'll be next week. So Ezekiel 39, 1 through 8. I'll read through here, and we'll start looking at a few of these few of the things that mentioned in here also. So we'll just read through it first, and then we'll get a flavor, and I'll point out some things in some of the verses. Therefore, the Son of Man, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. When we were studying Ezekiel 38, remember that some of these, they were identified as people of the north country, and most people believe that it's pointing to some forces out of Turkey and also Russia. They believe the problem with the interpretation of that verse, the chief prince, it can be interpreted either as a pronoun or as a proper noun in the Greek. I mean in the Hebrew, and so some translation makes that out to be Rosh, which is another term for the forces, the Scythians of the north, and then in the King James they make it a pronoun that points to a leader, and that's why it's the chief prince. So that's where the controversy is, and there's great scholars on both sides of the fence on that. So we may not know until it actually happens for sure, but some like to point to the fact that it's just a world leader, and others say that it's definitely somebody from Russia. And there's other verses that I don't want to dig deep into this particular passage on that, because there is so much great people have written books on that particular phrase. But Meshach and Tubal are definitely places of the north. Now, the other big thing about Ezekiel 39, and this is where I split the two up between the beginning and the end, is that Ezekiel 38, I believe, happened right at the beginning of the tribulation during the horse of war, which is the second horse, and at Ezekiel 39. So it's like bookends almost for the tribulation period. And the reason I do that is because if you look at Ezekiel 38, and we'll look at it just a few verses out of it here, you'll notice that they talk about some other places also that are not mentioned in Ezekiel 39. In Ezekiel 39, it's only mentioned here in this verse, these particular people groups. But in Ezekiel 38, they mention other groups that point to other countries that are around Israel. So I think that this might also point to the fact that Gog may be the Antichrist, represented by the Antichrist, who has gathered his armies, again, up in the valley up there in Galilee. I'm trying to think of the name of the valley. I should have put it in my notes, but I can't think of it right this minute. Let me see if I got the picture of my... I know I showed it to you a few weeks ago. That valley that's up Megiddo, the Valley of Megiddo, up in the north, and that's a well-known area for gathering for war all through the Bible. So most people believe that that's where they're going to gather together, and they're going to advance south. And so that Ezekiel 39:1 here is kind of indicative of that particular advancement. So let's just compare to Ezekiel 38, just a few verses. Starting in verse 2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. So this verse is identical almost. And say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, out of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Now this is where it changes. Here we see a whole list of countries that are involved with this. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands. The house of Tagoma and the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. So here we have a different group of people where in Ezekiel 39 they don't mention these groups anymore, like they're eliminated. And so I believe that that's why it also tells us that Ezekiel 39 is a different period of time than Ezekiel 38. Okay, back to Ezekiel 39, verse 2. Now I will turn thee back and leave but a sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel. A sixth part of thee. So it sounds like when I was researching this, I got the impression that the sixth part of the people who did not come with this group. And I have a funny feeling these may be people that have realized who the Lord was, and they could be people hiding out, descendants, people who are following the Lord. Part of that group that's going to be brought back together that Jesus is going to bring back from the four parts of the earth. That stay in the north and are not killed in the battle, and possibly those who are not part of those who took the mark that we see in the sheep and goat judgment. Because there are definitely people that are going to be saved out of this group, and we see that in Matthew 25, 31 through 36. And I just read this portion. It's actually longer, but I just want to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered together all nations. He shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on the right hand, but the goats on the left. Now, I realize that here in this particular passage, we're talking about saved and unsaved people. And it goes on to describe what it takes to be recognized as a sheep in this particular passage. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. That would be the sheep. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink, and I was a stranger, and you let me in. Then the requirements for this group of people is a little different than just a regular believer. They actually helped others during this time to protect them, to feed them, and so that Jesus is going to recognize them for their sacrifices in trying to help out their fellow man. Naked and you clothed me, I was sick and you visited me, I was in prison, you came unto me. Reminds me of, if you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List, very similar to that period of time when that man was so dedicated to try to save every Jew he could that he said, if I just could have saved one more. Kind of reminds me of this particular time and what these people are going to be doing also. And I will smite the bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. Oh, I'm back to Ezekiel 39. So in that passage we just read, those are the people that are going to be honored by King Jesus as being, and it goes on to in that particular passage, if you want to look at the rest of chapter 25, it describes, again, the requirements to be part of the sheep, and it also describes the goats, and the goats are going to end up in the lake of fire. So back to Ezekiel 39, verse 3, And I will smite the bow out of their left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of their right hand. Most people, whether you think this is at the beginning or the end, this is basically that they're going to try to attack, but they're going to fail because everything they try will just fall to the ground, basically. And King Jesus is basically going to, whatever they throw at him, he's just going to knock it to the ground. There's some verses on this also. Smite the bow. It could be missiles. It could be aircraft. Realize that we're talking about John saw a lot of this vision, and of course he had no idea what a tank looked like or what an aircraft looks like. But it's interesting that particular verse in there where it says in verse 3, let me go back to it. When it says arrows, that word can actually be translated as missiles, not just a regular arrow you use on a bow. So many theologians that believe that what John is seeing, as the only way he could describe it is this way. He didn't know what they were called. He just saw them, and it was the only word he could think up that actually described what was happening. But it could be aircraft or some kind of maybe helicopters, and that are actually attacking. In Psalm 76, 1 through 3, also kind of speaks to this. To the chief musician, a song of Asaph. In Judah is God known. His name is great in Israel. And Salem also is his tabernacle. Just might mention that Salem was the original name of Jerusalem. If you notice, if you see the way Jerusalem is spelt, and actually Salem is in there. If you go back to the period of time when Melchizedek, when he was king of Salem, that was actually Jerusalem area. And his dwelling place is in Zion, which Zion is always talking about Jerusalem. There break he the arrows of the bow and the shield and the sword in the battle. Selah. So, another indication that that whatever war is going to be going on here is going to be unfruitful for the people that are attacking. Also in Hosea 1:5. It shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. Jezreel, that's the valley I was trying to think of. And it's interesting that they use Jezreel because that's where the Antichrist troops are going to be mounting. So here I believe it's talking about that particular group of people. Jumping to chapter 2, verse 18 in Hosea. In that day will I make a covenant with them, with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven. And with the creeping things of the ground, I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and will make them to lie down safely. I love that last verse. Like, whatever they attempt to throw at them is just going to fall to the ground and not detonate. That's the general feeling I get out of that verse. Okay, so Ezekiel 39, verse 4. Thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, thou and all thy bands, and thy people that is with thee. I will give thee unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be destroyed. Now this is the verse that I don't believe can happen at the beginning. Because again, we still got a whole 7 years, and I don't believe that the way that the wording in the next few verses allows it to be at the beginning of the tribulation. Because it sounds like whatever happens in these verses is like the ending, not the beginning. So I just want to jump to Ezekiel 33, 27 through 29, also a verse in Jeremiah to kind of point to this same period to help support this. Ezekiel 37, 27. Say thou thus unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, as I live, surely they that are in the waste shall fall by the sword, and him that is in the open field will I give to the beast to be devoured, and they that be in the forts and in the caves shall die of pestilence. For I will lay the land most desolate, and the pomp of her strength shall cease, and the mountains of Israel shall be desolate, that none shall pass through. Then shall they know that I am the Lord when I have laid the land most desolate because of all their abominations which they have committed. Now this particular chapter is also talking about a period during Nebuchadnezzar, but I think this particular section could be applied to both. Mainly because of the fact that how the death, and there'll be a lot of bodies laying around. Some of this stuff sounds pretty grotesque in some ways, and I apologize for that part. But it is in the Bible. And also in Jeremiah 15:3. And I will appoint over them 4 kinds, saith the Lord, the sword to slay, the dogs to tear, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the earth to devour and destroy. The reason I point to this verse is because typically, yes, beasts can attack us, but there's going to be a period of time during the tribulation where the animals actually turn on human beings. And so I think that's why this particular prophecy in Jeremiah is pointing to the end times, not to a time during his period of time. Supporting this whole idea that the destruction is going to happen as we come back to earth. Also Revelation 19, 17 and 18. I'm just going to separate out these 2 verses because I want to support what I'm talking about here in Ezekiel, how they kind of tie together, Ezekiel 39. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourself together under the scepter of the great God. Excuse me. you may eat of the flesh of the kings and the flesh of the captains, and the flesh of the mighty man, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. So that's how I tie these two chapters together, is because in Revelation here we're talking about when Jesus returns, and I think that's what Ezekiel 39, 1 through 8 is talking about also. And there's other verses that we're going to be looking at when we get into the cleanup stage that also point to that. Okay, back to Ezekiel 39, verse 5. Thou shalt fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord God. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them to dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Now this ties to a couple of interesting things when it mentions fire. So I want to point to a few verses that really speak to the type of battle this may be like. And we're also going to talk about that word isles, which might point to, remember the speculation I had about where Babylon might be. And this kind of helps point to that also, that it could be on the sea coast. So Psalms 11:6. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire and brimstone, and horrible tempests. This shall be the portion of their cup. Remember back we talked about a verse that talked about that the Lord God is going to bring the cup of wrath. So this psalm kind of points to this particular way that he's going to do it. And Isaiah 66:14 through 16. And when you see this, your heart shall rejoice, and your bones shall flourish like a herb, and the hand of the Lord shall be known toward his servants, and his indignation towards his enemies. For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. Also in Amos 1:4 and 7 through 10. But I will send a fire upon the house of Hazael, which shall devour the places of Ben-Hadad. Jump into verse 7. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which of course is on the sea coast, which is right now is occupied by people that don't like Israel, that's for sure, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon, and I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God. When it says the remnant of the Philistines, again, this is pointing to the Gaza area. That's where the Philistines typically were during the time of the Bible. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4 I will turn away the punishment thereof, because they devoured up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. So this is where it points to Tyrus again, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, on the possibility of the location of Babylon. So I can see where some of the theologians think it might be not in Babylon proper, but also pointing to Tyrus, which has a history as being a satanic area and a place that Satan had found a residence before. Also Nahum 1:6. But I will send a fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Again, pointing to this idea of the destruction of Babylon, possibly. Or it could be just talking to the forces that Jesus is taking care of that are advancing from that area down towards Jerusalem. And then there's this strange verse in Zechariah 14:12. And almost anyone who reads it thinks of, if you've done any kind of military training, you know what exactly they're talking about, because it's about nuclear holocaust. So I'll just read through it here. Oh, I haven't finished Amos yet first. I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. Now I'll turn mine... Oh, no, I did read it. Nahum 1:6. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like fire, and his rocks are thrown down by him. Then Zechariah 14:12. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Very nasty sounding verse. And if you've done any kind of, if you know of any background in nuclear detonation, that's exactly what a person looks like who's destroyed by a nuclear blast. So getting out of that area. And back to the isles, Hebrews 12:28 and 29. Wherefore we receive a kingdom which cannot be moved. Let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. Back to the idea of the fire. That's why I included that. Now we're going to talk about the isles and the coasts of the maritime lands. Isaiah 11:11 mentions this. Now it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand against the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, and from Elam, from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the isles of the sea. So I may point to this alternate location we mentioned a few weeks ago, of Mystery Babylon. And I will just, I see we're out of time again, so I will stop there. I think I just might jump ahead again. You can read the Ezekiel passages in Jeremiah on your own. That was just reflecting back on this Mystery Babylon and some things that might point to Tyre. So let's just finish off verses 7 and 8. So I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people, Israel, and I will not let them pollute my holy name any more. And the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, it is come and is done, saith the Lord God. This is the day whereof I have spoken. So these verses speak to an end of human rule. And I would say that Revelation 16:17, where it says, it is done, is this day, this is the finale of this particular battle that Jesus has taken back the Jerusalem, and now we're going to go into the cleanup phase of the return to earth. But this is the day spoken of in Revelation 10, verse 7. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. So I believe that this is actually the end of the time of Jacob's trouble. Jesus has come back, and he is going to reign. But we aren't done exactly with this particular lesson, because I want to finish off with the cleanup phase next week. And then possibly, depending on how everyone feels about it, you can let me know if you would like to continue on into a more glorious time when we start talking about the Millennium Kingdom. And that would be to finish off Revelation and also get deeply into Ezekiel 40 through 48, which talks about a lot, and Isaiah and a few other places about what the Millennium Kingdom is going to look like. So this is really the end of the bad stuff. And let's end with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you so much for helping me through this lesson. And as terrible as this day sounds, Lord, I know it's you're not looking forward to it either. So help us, Lord, to save as many as possible. So that group behind you, as we advance back to earth, it grows greater and greater. And I want to give you all the praise and thanks for all you do, Lord. And thank you for the lessons to come. The worship service will be glorifying to you, and the rest of the services today. And be with Brother Somato, that he has a good message for us to help us, and we give you praise and thanks in all you do. And all the people said, amen.